25 hours of labor, 6 of those hours persistent back labor, 72 minutes of pushing, and naturally 0 hours of sleep. But that baby hit her chest and she immediately looked up at me and said, I cannot wait to do that again. Now, is that a perfect birth? That's for her to decide. But that feeling, that love for all that she had just done and all that had just happened, you can find the same with me inside of my birth course, Your Body, Your Birth. Created by a labor nurse who has seen it all and a mama who has done it 4 times, YBYB has everything you need to understand what your body's actually doing, how to work with what your body's trying to do, and how to make decisions inside of that process that you feel really good about. You can walk into your birth calm, excited, and informed about every intervention and choice along the way. And you can walk out of your birth saying, I cannot wait to do that again. To save 20% and get started today, head over to thelabormama.com/birth or use the link in your show notes and be sure to input the code podcast at checkout.
Motherhood is all-consuming.
Having babies, nursing, feeling the fear of loving someone that much.
And there's this baby on your chest and boom, your entire life has changed.
It's a privilege of being your child's safest space and watching your heart walk around outside of your body.
The truth is, I can be having the best time being a mum 1 minute, and then the next I'm questioning all my life choices.
I'm Lo Mansfield, your host of the Lo and Behold podcast. Mama of 4 littles, former labor and postpartum RN, CLC, and your new best friend in the messy middle space of all the choices you are making in pregnancy, birth, and motherhood. If there is one thing I know after years of delivering babies at the bedside and then having and now raising those 4 of my own, it is that there is no such thing as a best way to do any of this. And we're leaning into that truth here. With a mix of real life and what the textbook says, expert insights, and practical applications, each week we're making our way towards stories that we participate in, stories that we are honest about, and stories that are ours. This is the Lo and Behold podcast.
I'm not totally sure whether to call today's episode a birth story episode, an education episode, maybe not that fully, but a conversation for sure, a really rich, good, nuanced, and we will come back to that word nuance, but a nuanced conversation too. I have my friend Betsy with me today, not just like virtual friend like a lot of you, but also real life friend, kind of big sister friend, if you will, which you're here when she tells us more about herself when she says, hey. But Betsy is going to share her 3 birth stories, and we are going to use those, or she will. I do a lot of listening in this episode, but she is going to use those to also tell us more about just how motherhood has changed for her and what that has looked like and where she is now, where she hopes to land, or maybe not ever land. And we have this conversation kind of with those through lines of birth. For sure, you're going to get 3 birth stories, but just so much more too. So I just encourage you to listen to this full thing and listen to that final chapter of Betsy's story that brings us to where she and her family are right now too. I will tell you that Beth's story includes some hard things, some miscarriage stories that can feel pretty hard and pretty heavy, and some childhood or pediatric cancer as well. So if any of that feels just extra tender or not something that you feel like you can listen to right now, skip this episode. And when you feel ready, come back and listen to the full conversation that I get to have with Bets. I am so excited to talk to you, Betsy. Maybe you can share why you're especially special to me, but why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone, and then we'll kind of get into birth and more.
Yeah, I will. Hi, everybody. My name's Betsy. I am a woman, a wife, a mother. I have 3 kids. They are 13, 11, and 8. My 13 and 11-year-old are both boys, so I am deep in the trenches of tween teen boyhood, which is a whole thing. And then I have this precious little almost 8-year-old girl who is a delight. And I know you because I'm friends with your sister, Jen. If anyone heard her episode, I'm one of the friends she mentions. We became friends, I think, before both of us were pregnant, actually with our first. And we were in a Bible study together and navigated, the ins and outs of new motherhood together, which was just such a, I don't know, like crucible of a time that we haven't lived together in the same state in 12 years probably. And I still consider her one of my best friends. We talk once a month. It's not like we're in daily communication, but I just feel like those relationships are so solid. And I got to know you during that time because you were living with Jen for a portion. And then just being one of my good friends' little sisters, I've gotten to know you. So yeah, I'm glad
And
to be
now
here.
we share a very mutual love of the podcast.
Oh my
So
gosh.
shout
And
out.
honestly, one of my
Thanks for
happiest group
that.
texts is you, me, and Jen just being able to relate to the podcast. If anyone hasn't listened, it's this podcast and then the podcast. Those are the only two
Oh
you
yeah,
need.
thank you. That's it.
Opposite ends of the spectrum. You
Oh
will
yeah.
love them.
Okay, Betsy, that's perfect. Yeah, Jen's birth story, that's my older sister who we were talking about, is episode 2. So I shared my first birth story in episode 1. Then Jen came on and sat with me and talked about her first birth story. Actually, her only one. She ended up having one kiddo in episode 2. And she does mention Betsy in some of her postpartum conversation, especially. And I mean, we were both kind of in tears because the friendship and the community that Bets and Jen both had when they were having these babies is really, really precious. I mean, from the outside, it's like what we all kind of probably long for and hope for when we're having babies and in those months and years. So it was fun to watch Jen and Betsy watch you guys have that. I think it was a cool example of like, oh wow, like women can really do some of this community mom stuff together really well.
Absolutely. And I mean, my encouragement in that would just be find the moms group, whether it's mothers of preschoolers, if your birth center or your hospital has a moms group, do the awkward thing and join the moms group because you will not regret it. And your husband in the first weeks and months after your baby is not the trusted source. It is other women that you can like go to and cry and laugh and be like, what have we gotten ourselves into? So glad that was, it was kind of dropped into my lap, that group of women. And yeah, I'm so thankful for them.
Yeah, it was pretty special. So why don't we'll use that and we'll just go into kind of first birth and becoming parents and just, like take us on that story through your births. And you guys you're going to hear that we're going to kind of weave around between birth and some of the choices that Betsy's had to make for her family and her kids and stuff. So yes, we're going to hear her birth stories and then we're going to also hear a little bit more too. So why don't you just start us kind of with, the becoming parents and kind of stepping onto this road.
Yeah. So I got married when I was 24. My husband was a bit older than me. He was 31, and he had a son from a previous relationship who was living with us full time. So we were like right away parents. We were parenting together. And so we figured if we're going to have kids of our own, let's just start right away because we weren't in like this child-free honeymoon stage. Yeah. So we got pregnant pretty much right away after getting married. And it was interesting because none of my friends were pregnant. I was 24. I was quite young in my friend group to be pregnant. So I was nervous, but excited. And I got to 12 weeks. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start telling people. And I told my parents, I told my friend group, everyone. And that weekend, the weekend after 12 weeks, I started experiencing bleeding. And right away, I just knew, like, I was like, oh crap. So the day I started bleeding, I decided to go to the hospital and get an ultrasound or just kind of check in. And I went to our local ER and we sat in, it's kind of the cliche, like the cold, sterile waiting room. We went to the cold, sterile ER bay. They took me back solo for an ultrasound. Now I feel like with social media, it's kind of common knowledge. Like the ultrasound tech won't say anything, but I just remember she had this like stone face look on her face. Yeah. And I was just like, oh no, this is not good news. I can just tell. We went back into the emergency room and it's an emergency room. I'm sure there's lots of things going on that are more emergent. We waited multiple hours and finally halfway through the night, a doctor came in and he was very cold and very unkind. And he said, yeah, you've experienced a miscarriage and actually the fetus was never viable. And I was like, what? What does that mean? What is that? It was 2 a.m. There weren't a lot of questions to ask. He was pretty clear, but it just felt so abrupt and harsh to me. Yeah. And so we went home and I remember driving home and just thinking like, I am not going to do that again. Like, I'm not going into the hospital again for like such tender information. It became so clear to me that like relationship and medical care, Western medical care, it felt like we're just incongruent. I don't know. It just felt like it felt really bad. So I decided I was going to pass the miscarriage naturally. I think in that appointment, he was like, so you should just get a D&C. And I was like, I don't, just let me go. And so I went home, and I think later that week I had a natural miscarriage, and it was horrendous. It was like labor. I was shocked at how painful it was. My midwife at the time was like, take a Tylenol. And I was like, this Tylenol's not touching this. It was dilation. It was a really crazy experience inside of a really traumatic situation. And so that was, I guess, like the first go at things. And I really struggled with that, with, I guess, knowing like if my body was capable of doing what it seemed like every woman was doing, and then how I was going to find care inside of that, because the Western model felt so harsh to me and how I'd experienced it. I remember going to work the next week, and a gentleman that I worked with, who was probably in his 50s, brought me flowers. And he said, me and my wife experienced a miscarriage 30 years ago, and it's still painful for me. And I was like, what? I felt so seen. I felt so connected to like this bigger picture. And I went on to find out, you know, the statistics, I think it's 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 women experience pregnancy loss. And it helped ground me, knowing I was among, good company.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had checked the box. I was like, okay, pregnancy loss, every woman experiences it. Check the box, moving on. And I did. So we went on to get pregnant later that summer and gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. For that pregnancy, because of kind of what had happened, and also I was thinking about this today, like this was in the time, like there was no Instagram. Facebook was relatively unknown. The only thing there was a couple mommy bloggers who, from like the ones that I found, were all in this natural health space. So it was kind of this Christian homemaking natural health community. So it was Homebirth and like low medical intervention. And so I was like, okay, well, I had a really bad experience at the hospital. I do think my body is created to do this. So I'm going to pursue that. So we got a midwife. We got this amazing, amazing midwife. And I went through the pregnancy. Everything was great. I ended up going to 42 weeks, which in the state of Colorado is like the legal limit.
Yeah.
At that point, you have to be induced. And my midwife, I remember at my 42-week appointment, she was like, here's what you're going to do. She gave me some tips and tricks. And she was like, do not call me until you're in labor, unless, if there's an emergency, but like, don't call me. Because if you call me at 42 weeks one day, I have to transfer care to the hospital. So like, call me if you're in labor, and then I get to come deliver your baby. So sure enough, 42 weeks, 3 days, I went into labor and had a beautiful, very normal, natural 12-hour labor and delivery. I had a hoss of a baby. He was 9 pounds, 6 ounces. He tore through me, metaphorically and physically. And after the birth, so in a home birth, it's amazing. You're in your bed. They have like cleaned up. They've like taken away the sheets that you've birthed on. You're in your bed, cozied up. My husband was making me breakfast. They had called in another midwife to suture me because the stitches were pretty, or the, what do you call it, tear was pretty bad. And I was still bleeding significantly. And so they decided to do a dose of Pitocin, which is, I think, common, or, you can speak to that, but it wasn't super out of the ordinary. But I did know that, you go through a lot of the legal paperwork with midwifery. And I knew that if they did a second dose of Pitocin, we had to initiate hospital transport. It's another law that they have. And so they gave me a shot of Pitocin. And then about half an hour later, maybe, the midwife came to me and she said, you're still bleeding. I'm not concerned about it, but it's enough that your recovery is going to be harder if we let this keep going. And so I would like to give you the second shot of Pitocin. We don't need to initiate emergency transport. Like, we're not in that, flow chart. But I do want to do the second shot of Pitocin. And I'm like laying with my baby, oxytocin pumping through me. I'm like, whatever, do whatever. I don't care. And that was that. So I healed up fine. I had this beautiful baby. He was the perfect baby in all the ways that your firstborn is. Slept well, ate well. Like he was just perfect. He was a great baby. But I was starting to toe this line of like identity and image that I thought I had, which was like home birthing, attachment parent, co-sleeping, exclusively breastfed, nursing on demand, with like, oh, I actually can't function if I don't sleep. Like my mental health is in severe decline because I'm not sleeping uninterrupted hours. I actually maybe want to go back to work, which I kind of had thought I was not going to. And so I was toggling like, well, who am I then? Because I thought I was this and, whatever. And then the going back to work conversation got solved because I got pregnant again when our first baby was 11 months old. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just kind of push off that conversation for a little while. So I got pregnant with our second when Bowden was 11 months old. And that was a little soon, but with our previous loss, we were kind of like any pregnancy is a good pregnancy. We were excited about it. And probably around 12 weeks, like I still had kind of that fear of grief or of miscarriage. So at around 12 weeks, I started really settling in, like, this is happening, we're doing this. And all of this fear came up in my body about home birth and about how the story I told myself was, with my first birth, I almost bled out and died. And so I don't think I can do a home birth again. So I was talking to my husband about this and he was like, I don't remember that. Like that, when do you think you almost bled out? And I was like, well, the second shot of Pitocin, they gave me it. And that's what happens. And he was like, I feel like you should call the midwife. You should call her and talk to her about it, because that's not how I experienced it. And so I called my midwife and kind of told her what I was working through. And she basically had the same story as my husband. Like, that's not what happened. Here's my experience. Here's what happened. And she just helped me kind of like bridge the like fearful memory I had, which was an incomplete story, with like, no, this was the data. Like, this was the data that was happening in the room. And that kind of like soothed me enough that I was like, okay, let's go ahead and move forward with a home birth. And so we did. And so our second baby was delivered via home birth on December 25th. You may know the day, Christmas Day. And it was the most beautiful, serene birth ever. Both the midwives that were in attendance were like, this was like bizarrely peaceful. The lights were dim. It was quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I was just in the zone. Like, I was so zen. The only thing was I kept apologizing to the midwives because it was Christmas. And so like, I would have a contraction and then I'd be like, I'm so sorry. It's such a bad day for this. And they were just like, you're fine. Could you please
just stay in labor? Yeah.
And it was amazing. Like, it was just the easiest birth. Like, it was the easiest birth. And I don't say that lightly. It was a natural home birth. Like, it was, it was birth, but it was like my body knew what to do. I just was like in the flow. And we gave birth to our second boy, Jude Abram, and have been enduring his Christmas birthday ever since. Honestly, it is the worst day. And don't let anyone tell you any different. So so that happened. And then we were like, are we done? Should we have another? And there was inevitably the cliche, like, do we want to try for a girl? At that point, I had 2 boys under 2 and a 13-year-old stepson. And I was like, I can't risk having another boy. Like, I don't know. But inevitably we did. So we decided to get pregnant again. And that pregnancy ended in a miscarriage. So it's so funny. I mean, you can probably imagine or relate to this. Like, I was thinking through all of this to prepare for this. And I don't even remember the details of how I found out that was in miscarriage, but it did. And it felt painful in a new way because I felt like I'd checked the box on that. Right. Like, I understand some pregnancies end in miscarriage, but I had done that already. And I had like learned from it and grown through it and leaned into my faith. And I was like, this is bullshit. Like, I'm not going back. Turns out it didn't matter what I thought. so that pregnancy ended in miscarriage, and I figured, well, I'm not going to do a D&C. I'm going to let my body do what it needs to do, just like I did the first time. And a couple weeks later, maybe a month later, nothing had happened. Like I hadn't passed anything, which I thought was curious, but I started reading online, and there are situations where it just reabsorbs into your body. And I was kind of like, well, no matter. And then, so that was around the holidays. So then into the new year, I started feeling pregnant, like morning sickness, bloating, breast tenderness. And I was working with a kinesiologist at the time because we were still kind of outside of the Western model of care. Our kids didn't see a pediatrician. They saw a chiropractor if needed, rarely. We just didn't really have like a entry point into the Western medicine model. I was working with a kinesiologist, and he did some blood tests, and he was like, I think you're pregnant. Like your HCG is rising. We should get it, let's get it done in 72 hours. Let's get it done a week later. And sure enough, it was going up as though I was pregnant. And he comes into the room and he's like, I think you're pregnant. And I was like, because I knew, short of immaculate conception, I was not pregnant.
Yeah.
Like I knew because we'd been experiencing grief and 2 under 2, and there was no pregnancy.
You don't have
happening.
to explain.
So the doctor's like all excited, and I was like, no, I'm not pregnant. Like, what is happening? And so we decided to go get an ultrasound, and I think maybe there was one time we'd been intimate. And so I was kind of like, well, let's get an ultrasound and see what's going on. And that night, my midwife called me and she said, I've got some bad news. You are not pregnant, but you do have a 10-centimeter tumor in your uterus. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Okay. And she was like, this accounts for the HCG rising. And basically it was gestational trophoblastic disease, GTD, which I think can happen in a handful of scenarios. What happened with me was I was pregnant for a moment, and then the pregnancy ended, but that cluster of cells continued to grow as though, they were doing the work as though like divide. Yeah. And it turned into a tumor, a mass of rapidly dividing cells without a purpose, I guess, at this point. And so GTD often happens after miscarriage. It can happen in other scenarios where it is linked to cancer. With a miscarriage, it's not usually cancerous, but it's kind of all under that same umbrella. And so my midwife, of course, kind of told me this, and then was like, so it was later in the evening. She wanted to make sure to get me the news, and then was like, we'll handle this week. Like, call me in a couple days. And I remember getting off the phone and just laying in bed and being like, oh, this is how I'm going to die. Like, I'm going to die from this cancer in my, this tumor in my uterus, and I'm going to die, and I'm going to leave my 2 kids without a mom. And I'm, and I just was like off to the races. Like, I just was like, this is it. This is my story. This is the end of me. And I'm so thankful. I had this woman in my life. At that time, I was part of a MOPS group. It's Mothers of Preschoolers. It's a international mothering community. I would highly recommend if you need community. That's a great place to at least start to find it. I was in a MOPS group, and there were mentor moms, so older women who were past, kind of grandma age, who would mentor the new moms in the group. And I called one of the mentor moms and told her what was happening. And I just kept saying, like, I'm just so afraid I'm going to die. I'm so afraid this is like, I'm going to leave my kids without a mom. And she was so sweet because she helped me toe this line, which I've used so many times now, of like, there are a lot of doors we can walk through in this. And one of them is you dying. Like, that is absolutely possible. And you absolutely need to have that be real. But instead of trying to push away from that and like hold it like it couldn't happen, why don't you just hold it so close to your heart that if that's the door that we end up walking through, like, you're ready and you're close to it. And I am not exaggerating when I say like that like physical thought of just like, or the mental image, and then holding my heart, the mental image of like, I'm just going to hold this close to me until I know what to do next, until I know what else is happening. I mean, it was like a phrase she used that I don't think she realizes, like, I think about all of the time. So a couple weeks later, I went ahead and had a DNC. So I had a surgery to remove the tumor and test it, and it was non-cancerous, thank God. And my HCG started to decline for the first time in 6 months.
Yeah.
And I, returned to normal with what felt like a new lease on life. I felt like at that point, I was very sure I wanted to have one more baby, because it was like this 6-month period of wondering if I was pregnant, and just all the thought cycles you go through of like, am I going to get that? Am I going to get the baby that I've been trying to navigate for? And so we got pregnant again that spring. And that was probably my hardest pregnancy by way of mental health, because I just really felt like I wasn't sure if my body knew what to do. Like, I was like, does it understand how this is supposed to happen?
What is the assignment?
Yeah. Does it get that now we're pregnant, so now we're growing in this way? And
yeah.
it was just super hard. And we decided with our first 2 births, we had not gotten we didn't know the gender until birth. And we decided with this one, I kind of joke, like, I wanted a girl, but if I was having my 3rd boy, I needed to prep. I needed to know ahead of time. I couldn't have that happen in the hospital room. And so we had some dear friends of ours find out that, we got the blood test, sent the results to them, and then they did a gender reveal thing for us at a park. And sure enough, we were having our baby girl, which if you're a mom, you are 100%. It is not, it's not a lie to say you'd be happy with a healthy baby. Yeah. And the fact that it was a girl was what we needed. It was what we needed both in that moment to like move through the healing of everything we had been through. And we didn't know what we were going to need because of what was coming. So yeah, we were going to go with our same midwife. We were going to do a home birth, like I was a home birthing woman. That's what I did. And we did the initial care with our midwife. And then at 30 weeks pregnant, our midwife called me and said, I have had a death in the family, like an immediate family member had passed away. And I think it was the dynamic where she had to go back to work right away. Financially, she had to go back to like a corporate job. She had been doing midwifery, as a kind of divine calling, and she had to move immediately into a corporate job for health insurance and financial reasons. And so she said, I have these other people I can hand you off to. They're good. You'll like them. And something in me, I was like, no, I can't do it. I think anyone who's listening who's had a home birth or who works with midwives, and even, hospital births, any kind of birth, the people in the room, like the people helping you birth, are suddenly like sacred kin. Yeah. And so, especially with a home birth, because you are just giving so much trust to this person, and you do have a different level of relationship since you're in your home and visits are being done inside of your own house. And I just knew that I wasn't going to be able to develop that relationship with someone new in a way that I felt comfortable enough to do the birth at home. Because at that point, I was kind of like, I'm not sure my body does know what to do. The first birth, I had to get the extra Pitocin. I've had this gestational trophoblastic disease. I just had these little suspicions, or I don't know, these moments where I was just like, maybe we should go to a doctor, And luckily we had a hospital near us that was actually just opening, and they had a nurse midwife team. And I went and met with them, and they were great. They were kind of the perfect balance of patient first, holistic care with Western, all of the science. And I don't know how to speak to that well, because I think both sides have everything I just mentioned in certain scenarios, but this group that I worked with was a really good balance of that. And I still had to kind of give and take. I had to do the glucose test, which in home birth you can do with a blood sugar monitor and a high carb meal. And at this clinic or at this hospital with the group I was working with, they wouldn't birth me unless I did whatever the product
more standard
is.
Screening. Yeah.
And things like that, where I was like, well, this is tricky, because the way that I got comfortable with home birth was by researching every single thing that could go wrong at a hospital And like every single thing the hospital did that would like intervene in a way that was bad for the baby, or like the glucose test, like, well, that's a non-natural way a glucose would rise. Like you're never going to have that many carbohydrates at once. That's, I grounded myself in proving why that was the wrong way to do it. And so then to move into that system and be like, okay, well, actually, maybe it's wrong. Maybe it's neutral, probably, but I have to do it because this is the path I'm on. So I had to start kind of like softening myself to all of those things. And that was fine. Or it was what it was. It was interesting because so Selah was born at 40. She was born on her due date. And the night before, I had taken castor oil because I wanted to get things moving. And I figured, I had 3 kids, or, a stepson, 2 little kids. I was pregnant. I was like, let's just get this show on the road. And I took castor oil and things started moving. I started having some contractions and then everything stopped and I couldn't feel her at all. And I very quickly went down the like, oh, what has happened? I've done something, like I have intervened in a way that has caused a problem. And we went to the hospital for a stress test. I think, is that what it's called? Stress test?
A non-stress test, NST.
Yeah. Yeah. So we went to the hospital and I was like, I'm due tomorrow.
Triage. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm in labor, but it stopped. I can't feel the baby. I've, drank the sugary drink. That's like a way that my midwife would, sorry, let me take a step back. During pregnancy, if I got nervous about the baby not moving enough or whatnot, the midwife would say, oh, just, drink something really sugary or go on a walk or kind of, get the baby awake, moving around, and surely you'll feel her. So I tried those things. Nothing was working. I could not feel the baby at all. And so I went to the hospital and they did the stress test and the baby was fine, like perfectly good, cooking. And I didn't want to tell them I'd done the castor oil because I was like the hippie mom who was pushing back against everything. And I didn't want to come in and be like, and I drank castor oil. And so I just was like, I don't know. I can't feel the baby. They were like, you're fine. Go home, go back to bed. Come, you'll be in labor soon enough. And soon enough, the next day, I went into labor naturally and labored at home for a while and was, trying to push off going to the hospital for as long as I could, which I think is one of the reasons I love listening to you talk about birth so much, because when you present that information, it's just logical, like stay home for as long as you can. When I was doing that, it was because I was afraid to be at the hospital because of the cascade of intervention that would inevitably happen to me because I watched The Business of Being Born, okay? And I knew that if I showed up at that hospital too early, bad things would happen. It was fear-based. It was not like empowered, birth plan, kind of like statistically driven, accurate. And that's just why I love listening to you talk about it, because I feel like I align with you on so many things, but more it's like the pace at which you deliver it is just soothing to me. So so I was at home and I'm laboring at home and it's great. And I had my 2 little kids like rubbing my back. And there came a point where I was like, don't touch me ever again, either of you. I am like feral and I will eat you alive. And I was like, oh, I'm transitioning. Like, not only do we need to go like 10 minutes ago. And so we got into our car. We were actually in our minivan and I was like on all fours in the back, just like, oh my gosh, like we are, it was I think 7-minute drive and it was the longest 7 minutes of my life. And we got to the hospital and it was a brand new wing of the hospital. And like they didn't do labor and delivery at this hospital until then. And so there was, a full staff and like 3 women on the whole floor, I think, giving birth or having just given birth. And so I show up and everyone's like, okay, let's go. And I said, this is my 3rd baby. I was here 12 hours ago. This is my 3rd baby. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty far along. And I was just talking to them like this, just like, I think I'm pretty far along. And they were like, yeah, okay. Like, let's go lay down. And so I was like, no, I mean, seriously. And then I'd like stop and have a contraction. And then I'd be like, okay, well, where should I, like, what room can I be in, and we got into the bed and the doctor came in or the midwife came in to check me. And I was like, as she's checking me, I was like, I really want to go in the shower. I want to be in the shower for a little while. I hadn't gotten to do a water birth. I was pondering water births in my home births and my midwife didn't want to do, like, she didn't do water births. She didn't feel like they were safe. And so I was like, I at least want to be in the shower this time. And this hospital had access for really cool, walk-in amazing showers. And the midwife was like, oh, no, you're not going anywhere. We're going to start pushing now, because I was like fully dilated. And it was like, it went from like, haha, this silly mom thinks she's past transition, to like, bring in the team. We're going to start pushing. And I was like, what? I thought I had a minute.
Can I just say it's actually really wild to me that the team maybe like received you that way initially? Because let me tell you, if a third or a fourth time mom comes in front of me and she's like, I'm going to have this baby, I believe her. And this might be an issue if I say like, I maybe don't believe that first time mom quite as much.
Totally.
Like,
sure, they don't know the sensation.
but those multips coming in like you did, like you don't have to be screaming, like, And
I don't think I was even there though. I don't think I was at the point where I was like, I'm having this baby. I was just kind of like, I'm here.
Pretty sure
I'm like ready.
Ready. Yeah.
And they were like, okay, let's, like, and then they were like, oh my gosh, like indeed, you are ready.
Yes. I was the same with my kids, and I don't want to like steal your story, but it was the same where they're like, what do you think? Is today the day? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I think so. Like, I still wasn't there either. So I just feel like it still surprises me. I feel like the team can look at other stuff and be like, maybe the mom doesn't believe it, but like, we believe it. So it's just interesting.
And I think, speaking of that, of like, are you ever sure? I think that's like my theme of my whole parenting or my motherhood is like, I didn't want to be in that hospital to begin with. Like, I wanted to be at home with my first midwife doing the home birth that I was designed to do. So I was already in the hospital. I'd already gone in the day before. I was embarrassed by that. Like, I felt stupid. And so then I went in again, and like, I was in labor. I was past transition. Yeah. Like, I was there, and I still was kind of like, I don't want to like intrude, but I might need to have a baby. It's so funny. Oh it is. Gosh.
It's weird what we like, the stories we tell ourselves kind of in the middle of all of it. It's wild.
Like, no one cares. No one cares. Yeah. So at that hospital, they had nitrous oxide, which was like kind of newer at the time, or maybe not newer, but I don't know. I was birthing at home. There was nothing. Yeah. So it was new to me. And I did that. I don't know if you understand what I mean by like, I couldn't find the cadence of like, you have to breathe it in like 30 seconds before the actual contraction for the pain relief. And no one really explained that to me. So I was breathing during the contraction. It was not scratching it. So I just was like, this is annoying. It makes a lot of noise. It's cumbersome. I was just like, forget it. Let's just get this thing out of me. So that happened. And I mean, there's not a lot to report. Like, it was a pretty straightforward birth. And the one thing I do remember is afterwards I got done, like the baby comes out and they were like, here, mom, hold her, like here. And I was like, oh, just someone take her. Like, I was so tired. I was so exhausted that I was like, Josh, you hold her. Like, just stop trying to, again, like attachment parent, like co-sleeping hippie. I was just like, get that thing away from me. Like, someone else hold the damn baby. And they were like, oh, okay. Like, I thought you were particular about this. So my husband held her, and we have the most precious pictures from that. So it all worked out. And yes, we stayed at the hospital. At that point, I was like, this is like a hotel. I'm living the lap of luxury. I got 2 young kids at home. Like, I just was like, I'll stay as long as they'll have me. Which was only a day, or she was born at night, and I think we stayed a full next day or something. And it was so sweet. She was a delightful baby. Having a gender that's not the gender you had the time before is its own special uniqueness. So it was just so fun to have 2 boys and then our precious little baby girl. And we named her Selah Mariah Ruth. Selah is a biblical word. It's found in the book of Psalms, which for anyone who's familiar with the Bible, the book of Psalms is a part of the Bible that's meant to be sung. And Selah is the word that they put after a passage that you have sung. And it means pause and reflect, like consider what has come before. And it was really meaningful for us to give her a name that was kind of encompassing of everything we'd been through to that point, because it felt like, at that point I'd had 5 pregnancies, and it just felt like a lot of learning had happened and a lot of kind of reflection was needed. And yeah, she was a great baby. We were, doing all the things. We were attachment parenting. She slept on me for every nap. We co-slept. She exclusively breastfed. Like, we were everything that identity gives you. And she was great. And we were really happy. The boys were old enough to go to preschool, kindergarten. They went back to school. And we just had this very sweet little happy family. And that is when the story takes a significant left-hand turn, which is when Selah was 11 months old. Our oldest, Bowden, he was 6 at the time. He got sick. It was December, and he got sick with what we felt like was a cold. He was very, very sick, and we took him to the doctor, and the doctor said, yeah, it's just a bad virus. Take him home and keep an eye on him. And I feel like I knew something wasn't right. I knew it wasn't a virus. And after about a week, no one else in the family had gotten sick. No one else was experiencing symptoms, which for those of us with multiple kids know, like,
not typical.
One kid is sick. Everyone is sick, right? And so I just started getting this pit in my stomach, like something is not good and is not right. And so we took him back to the doctor and got him some blood work done. And we were working with a pediatrician and a kinesiologist, and they were working together as well. And the kinesiologist called us, and she said, do not pack a bag, like, run, do not walk. You need to take him to Children's Hospital immediately. He has blood levels that aren't, like, he won't see the sun tomorrow. He will not wake up if you do not get him to a hospital. On the way to the hospital, my husband was like, I wonder if he has cancer. And I was like, babe, don't be so dramatic. Like, he's sick. Don't be crazy. And he was like, I just don't know why the doctors would tell us that. And so we ended up in the hospital, at the Children's Hospital, and for 2 weeks, every test under the sun could not figure out what was wrong with him. And the doctors kept saying, like, well, we could do a bone marrow biopsy. And in hindsight, it feels hilarious to consider that we were declining that. But you have to imagine in the moment, like, we were like home birth, unvaccinated. Like, none of my children had ever had a shot in their life. They had a pediatrician only because we needed one for a school physical. They'd never been to the doctor outside of that. And we had been in the hospital for 2 weeks, and all the team was like, yeah, we don't know. Who knows? Maybe we could try a bone marrow biopsy. And we were like, no, absolutely not. Like, you guys need to figure out what's going on. You guys need to have a plan and not just like throw stuff at the wall and hope it sticks. And so actually the next day, his blood levels started improving, and they were like, who knows? Looks like it was a terrible virus no one could have expected. You should go home and keep an eye on him. And we did for another 2 weeks, and he was not getting better. And so we took him back he got a fever, which was like the big thing. If he gets a fever, bring him back. He got a fever. We went back to the hospital. This was early January 17th, 2019, and woke up the next morning, and the doctor came in and said, it is abundantly clear in his peripheral blood, the blood we drew this morning, that Bowden has leukemia. And so he was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia when he was 6 years old, January of 2019. Selah was 11 months old, and then our middle son, Jude, was 5. He had just turned 5. And so, that's kind of like a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
Obviously. Bo was diagnosed when he was 6. He relapsed when he was 8. We had to seek relapse care in Philadelphia. We live in Denver. So we were living in Philadelphia, like some of us were home. We had an au pair trying to raise the other children while we were in emergency care in Philadelphia. It was a really, really hard, long couple years.
Yeah.
He has been in remission now for a handful of years after an experimental trial that he got on in Philadelphia. So as far as like that plot line goes, like, things are good and he's healthy. And, it's funny because most of the time when I'm asked to speak about things, it's that topic. So to only give it 2 minutes is kind of funny, but it's just not the point of this talk. So the thing I think that's interesting to me is that, the day Bowden was diagnosed, like, we went from being like this really anti-Western medicine, attachment only family to, like, overnight. I mean, we lived in the hospital. Selah started full-time 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. daycare She was picked up by my mom. She was given bottles by grandma and grandpa. She was like tended to in the night by grandparents and friends who would stay with us while we were living in the hospital. I stopped breastfeeding immediately. I like tried to hold on to that for a minute, and my body was just like, absolutely not. Like, we're going to dry up your milk supply for you. Like, the stress of everything was just like, yeah. And I think it's just interesting because I look back on all of it. I mean, as I was thinking about talking with you, I look back on all of it, the miscarriages, sitting in the hospital and having the doctor be so crass and unkind to me during my first miscarriage, like getting gestational trophoblastic disease, all of it. Like, I'm like, there were all these moments where I started to have to do this dance between like, I need Western medicine, actually. Like, I need it to help me when my body doesn't have the exact right answer. And also, I'm not all in on it. Like, I'm actually pretty sure of some things about Western medicine that I don't want to interact with. And it was like, those were all stepping stones that got me to this point where it was like, well, not only do I have to use it because my child is so unwell, but it's going to keep my child alive, and it's going to cure him from something that would, 40 years ago was incurable and would have resulted in his death. And I had to let go of so much of my motherhood. Like, I had to let go of being an attachment mom to Selah and exclusively breastfeeding and things that were like so much my identity. I should say, like, at that time, it felt like I was giving up my identity.
Yeah.
When really, like, I realized, like, the through line is, like, I'm the best mom that they could have. Like, I'm the best mom I could be. That's the identity. Like, that's actually my identity. It's not about if I co-slept with Bowden, which I stopped after like 3 months because I was like, this is annoying. You need to sleep. Like, here's this dark nursery, figure it out. Like with Jude, I thought I would breastfeed multiple years. I was like, I am available. And he stopped breastfeeding after like 9 months. He just was like, not interested. There were all these moments where like my identity was so what I thought was grounded in these tent poles of like, I home birth, I exclusively breastfeed, we don't use Western medicine. And life like threw me into this slurry of like crying uncle and being like, okay. And for many years that looked like, I don't know what my identity is. Like, can I still call myself like a crunchy hippie mom if my kid's getting chemotherapy every week? Like, can I still say I'm an attachment parent if my like 1.5-year-old doesn't breastfeed and is in daycare 60 hours a week? Like, am I allowed to still claim what I know to be true, which I realized was I am doing the best job I can. Like, I am so committed to being a good mom to these kids, and it looks nothing like what I thought it would. And it's funny because I often talk about when I share the cancer story, like, I would never choose to have the path that I walked. Like, I wouldn't choose the miscarriages. I wouldn't choose, especially Bowden's cancer.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't choose a life different than like what we have. I would never choose a difference because I have kids that are so aware of like the meaning of family and the fragility and the tenderness, like the trauma, the working through trauma, the healing, like the nuance of like, we take really good care of our bodies and we use an infrared sauna and we drink gross herbal tea in the winter and like we do all those things. And if you're sick, like our middle son, like this is kind of a funny example, but like our middle son last summer was like, my ear hurts. And I'm like, yeah. Here's, lay down, here's some garlic oil, a heat pack, lavender. We're going to figure this out. And he was like, I actually just want to go to a doctor. Like, I want a doctor to see me. And for him, like, he was always just kind of left behind when his older brother was getting so much medical attention. And so I was like, okay, that's probably good. It's probably good to let him see a doctor just to kind of give him that. And we went to the doctor and the doctor was like, oh my gosh, he has like a raging ear infection. Like, you need antibiotics, like all this stuff. And I was just like, what a gift. Like, what a gift to be alive and aware and just like open-hearted, that I don't have all the answers and I'm not stuck inside of this like specific identity of what makes me a mom. It's like I'm just here, and I keep hoping that every painful experience is like I'm checking the box and I'll never have to go back to this again because I've learned that I'm different and I've moved on. When in reality, like I'm just here. Like I just am holding everything close to me. I'm holding close to me that the doors that open might be scary and painful, or they might be healing and whole and beautiful. And no matter what, like I'm here. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you for sharing all of that. It's
So
funny.
that's all
I know
got.
that. I know you kept saying like, I know I came on to talk about birth. I will tell you guys, I want to have Betsy back on to talk kind of more about like navigating having sick kids. I've thought about having her come on with my sister, Jen, because Jen has had a sick kid as well. So they've shared some of those things. They have different stories. So I don't want to say it's all the same, but so I am kind of like hopeful to have them both back on and we can get into more of some of this. But I wanted Betsy to come on and talk about like her births as well. And of course, I knew they led to Bo and what came after having the babies too, because it's this conversation, I think, about identity that is so valuable and applies like that. We often begin this in pregnancy and birth where we're saying, what side am I choosing? Like, and then we put these boundaries around ourselves. And sometimes they're helpful because they help us feel strong, like, sure.
Absolutely.
And so I'm not saying like, don't choose and chase the things that you really believe in. I want that for you. That's my whole platform is like learn and choose. But I think that with that, we have to do what you did, which is, or you're doing, I would say it's probably still a work in process, which is be willing to accept that we might change our minds, or that the identity that we thought like fit us really well actually didn't, or that we're actually defining our own version of what attachment parenting looks like, or gentle parenting, or, I mean, unmedicated birth. Some people are, if you have no epidural, that doesn't count if you still had another medicine, like there's all these in betweens. And so I think ultimately I wanted to hear you talk about that, of the freedom to change your mind, the grace to give yourself that freedom, and then the recognition too of like being really careful about what we actually put our identity in. Because I think I personally feel like you're exactly right, that it actually isn't about what parenting style we choose or what birth we have, but simply about the mother we are for our child, like the relationships that we have with him. That is what tells us like who we are or what kind of mother we are, not whether or not they contact, nap, breastfeed, or never go to the doctor or get every vaccine or don't. Like it doesn't, we can't, like those things we don't get to hold on to those so tight forever.
And I think it is hard because, to your point, especially when you're starting out, you're like, who am I as a mom? And you have to grab to something.
Yeah.
Like no one goes into a home birth like, well, I don't know, maybe we'll end up at the hospital.
This sounded cool.
Like,
yeah.
No, everyone is like, I'm going to do a home birth, and there's fear with that. And so I've got to like ground myself in reasons to stay here. How am I going to stay here? And also, like the tenderness with yourself, that changing your mind doesn't, I don't know. I guess I just always thought I would have it figured out. I would figure it out. I would figure out the sleep schedule, the bedtime routine, how to make enough breast milk. I would just figure it out, and it would be done, and we would move past it. And I think that's the point, is like, there's nothing to figure out. There's a million little things to consider. There is nothing to figure out. And the closer, sooner that you can get to that, I just feel like it's like, that's where the freedom is. That really is where like the beauty of just like showing up as a mom who loves her children, and one day might decide one thing and the very next day might decide something different. And that doesn't make you wishy-washy. It just makes you human.
Yep. And that's like, to me, that is just the whole thing of all of this, is recognizing that there isn't there's not an end game, like the day where you're like, I've made it. Like I've really got this thing figured out. Like you have someone may hate this. You don't ever make it. Every single day, our relationship with our kids are changing. If we're in a relationship with someone while we're raising these kids, it's changing. If one of our kids gets sick, what we decide about how we feel about something, it will change. If one of our kids likes something that we thought they wouldn't, like, it's constantly changing. You're not going to make it. You just get to be in it. Like, I feel like that's ultimately what I hear from you is like, I get to be here.
Yeah.
That's the identity. I am here and I'm a mom.
And I think that's where the like tricky line of like, I would never say I'm grateful for cancer.
Right.
And I'm sure you can relate to this in your own grief story. The closer you get to the fragility of life and this side of the veil that is every moment you wake up and you take a deep breath and you're like, I cannot believe I get this. I cannot believe it. And I'm sad at what got us here and I'm sad for who's not with us. But like the fact that I am here, I don't think I would have that perspective without cancer. And it's a perspective that I literally think I'm the luckiest person in the world.
Yeah.
And it's hard to marry those two. It's hard to figure out like, well, what does that mean given I think cancer, I kind of joke cancer ruined our lives and it didn't. It actually made them really robust in a way that I just can't imagine not having.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all that with me. I know that it's obviously emotional still to go back to some of those places and spaces. So I appreciate it. I'm super excited to just, it sounds weird, but like have this out here. I just can picture it resonating in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different moms and families who are right where you are, where you're changing your minds or wanting to, or you feel like people won't let you, or maybe you actually know I do want to stand firm because I am doing the work. Like there's just so, much actually, there.
Like if we come back and me and Jen talk together, her and I have a very different approach to medicine.
Yeah.
And even we were in this mother's group and if you guys have listened to her birth story, like she was coming home like, I don't know, I haven't researched it. Meanwhile, I'm like hours deep in like the vitamin K shot and its efficacy. And I'm just like, what do you mean you haven't researched it? Like I feel like surrounding yourself with people that don't think like you and just being like, and you know what? It's okay. We're all going to get through it and we're going to have perspectives given to each other that are, they make us whole.
Yes, they do. They do. Okay. Why don't you, I'll put it in the show notes because I know your details, but just share them really quickly. Like if someone wanted to talk to you about any of this or more on some of the cancer stuff, Instagram handle, email address, what would that be?
Yeah. So I had a pretty cool Instagram following and had to close it down because there's a wild, wild world out there of people taking images of cancer kids and trying to get money and doing very nefarious things. So I actually, in haste one night, closed down my Instagram account, so you cannot find me there. However, I have written extensively, thousands and thousands of words on my blog about pediatric cancer and everything that goes alongside that, specifically the clinical trial that Bowden was enrolled in, which is called CAR T therapy, which is a really cool new science with using immunotherapy to fight cancer. And so I'm really passionate about that. I will talk to you about anything, birth, motherhood, identity. But if you want me to really go off and you bring up cancer, I am there for it. So I have a blog where you can find my contact information. It's The Heavyweight, www.theheavyweight, weight spelled WAIT.
Perfect. And like I said, we'll put that down below. And then last thing I just ask everyone before we finish up, what's something in your life right now that's just making you so happy?
Okay. Well, there's two things I will share. One is we have a lot of trauma to play out in our family because of Bowden's cancer journey, and how that showed up for our middle son was that he really struggled accessing public school, or I should say school outside of the home, for many years. He has had a really hard time. And this year, for the first year since he was 5, since Bowden was diagnosed, he is in school full time, out of the house. I am not homeschooling him anymore, which it's like cancer. It was a gift and I never want to go back. So I am truly thrilled for him that he has access to that at this point in his healing, and thrilled for me because I have been put through a lot of things that I don't choose to do in my life, and homeschooling is one of them. So that's one. And then the second is my husband and I just celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary last weekend, and we are going to Spain at the end of the month to do the pilgrimage on the Camino de Santiago for 7 days. And I am living for that.
Yeah.
So,
that's going to be amazing. I got to go to Spain once and not do that. I've heard of this, and it's such a gorgeous, beautiful country. Like, it's so colorful. It's
it's
just
everything.
It's going to be good. It's going to be great.
Yeah, we're so excited. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for being vulnerable again. I loved hearing it. I've never heard you tell that whole story, to me or to Jen. So it felt really special to get to hear it kind of from start to where you are now. We won't say finish because we're still here.
Yeah.
But
I would encourage everyone almost to pretend you're being interviewed for a podcast and tell the story, because it's really cool to kind of write down all the details you didn't consider.
Yeah.
Or write down all the details and then see the through lines that you didn't consider. Like, oh, I was actually kind of being prepped for this many years ago, or I was changing my mind about things and didn't even realize it. So, yeah.
Thanks, Betsy.
You're so welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to the Lo and Behold podcast. I hope there was something for you in today's episode that made you think, made you laugh, or made you feel seen. For show notes and links to the resources, freebies, or discount codes mentioned in this episode, please head over to loandbeholdpodcast.com. If you aren't following along yet, make sure to tap subscribe or follow in your podcast app so we can keep hanging out together. And if you haven't heard it yet today, you're doing a really good job. A little reminder for you before you go. Opinions shared by guests of this show are their own and do not always reflect those of myself and the Labor Mama platform. Additionally, the information you hear on this podcast or that you receive via any linked resources should not be considered medical advice. Please see our full disclaimer at the link in your show notes.